What are we talking about here today? Medical decision-making, advanced healthcare directives, and really this is all about dealing with medical issues in hospitals, the legal planning steps you have to take, and the critical roles that need to be played by people in your life to keep you safe. And this is going to blow your mind. Did you know this staggers me? 99,000 Americans die every year from hospital-acquired infections. People who go to the hospital get sick because they're in the hospital and die at a rate of almost 100,000 per year. That's some of the statistics. And the third leading cause of death in America is medical errors in hospitals. So between hospital-based infections and errors, over 300,000 people may be dying, maybe over 400,000. The statistics are a little bit all over the place, but yeah, that's right. Up to 99,000 Americans die every year from hospital-based infections. Over 250,000 die every year because of medical errors. And different studies have different statistics. Maybe some are higher, lower. Regardless, it's staggering. It is staggering. And so what we're going to talk about here today are ways both to make sure that your wishes are honored, that someone can step in to manage your healthcare if you can't do it for yourself, and to make sure you stay safe. And we're really here to help you control what you can control. And again, this talk will give you and your loved ones critical tools and steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. And yes, this can be life and death, not hyperbole. You saw the statistics. So what are we going to specifically cover here today? Let's just go over the issues we're going to cover. So first, the critical legal document. What is an advance directive? We're going to go over what that is, how you put it into place, ensuring that your wishes are honored, because it's more than just a legal document. There's other steps you have to take. What happens to your remains after you pass away? That's a little bit, it's after the hospital issues. Hopefully that's not split up by an error in a hospital. But where can your remains go? It's more options than you might think. And critical. This is where Myra Gerson-Gilfix is going to give a wonderful talk. Staying safe in the hospital, the crucial role of the patient advocate, what that is, and how they can keep you safe in the hospital. Critical end-of-life decisions and issues you have to be aware of. And then, of course, tying this all together, steps that you and your family must take, and the ways that we, the Gilfix and the Pole team, can help you. Really quickly, just about our firm, you guys know us, but if you're sharing this with anybody who doesn't know us, we're Gilfix and the Pole. We're in the Bay Area, been around for over 40 years at this point, right? So we are very proud of our heritage. We are very proud of our wonderful client community. We have clients all the way from San Diego, all the way up to the Northern California border near Oregon. It is our mission to provide amazing value and return on investment, and to empower you, because that's what this is all about. It's about empowering you to make sure that you and your loved ones are protected. And today, I'm very excited that it's not just me, it's my parents are both here. Michael Gilfix, the founder, along with my mother, Myra Gerson-Gilfix, the co-founder of Gilfix and the Pole Associates. And my mom, Myra Gerson-Gilfix, is also passionate about healthcare decision-making. She's published articles, she's done research, she's helped me through some life and death situations. She's helped my dad. And obviously Michael Gilfix, also a founder of a co-founder of the field of elder law along with her. So this is what they have done and thought about for decades. So why don't we jump in to the critical document that you need to have in place, and that's an Advance Healthcare Directive. And let me just quickly go over what this is. So as part of any estate plan, you obviously need a revocable living trust, durable power of attorney, advance directive. See our other Gilfix law videos if you're not familiar with these, or talk to us about it. But a lot of people think of this as almost like a secondary document because it doesn't relate to your finances. It is separate from your financial decision-making documents. But really, it's something that covers the situation where, what if you're in the hospital and you're incapacitated? We recently saw Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills player, who was knocked out in a football game and his heart stopped and he couldn't speak for days. Well, who was authorized to talk to his doctors? Who was authorized to make decisions for him? What if you're in an accident? What if you're in a coma? What if you are just out of it for a while? Who can step in to make decisions for you? Or what if you have dementia? The Advance Directive is the document where you can name the person or people who can communicate on your behalf, who can view your medical records, and who can make decisions for you. But ideally, the document should contain guidance. So you're taking the burden off of the shoulders of your loved ones and the people you've named, so they don't have to guess as to what you'd want in really tough situations. Mike is going to go over a lot of those critical issues and what you have to think about and what your options are. And as we say here, taking responsibility for these decisions, putting them in this document is really a gift to your family, a gift to your loved ones, because just think of how hard it is to make life and death decisions for someone else. If you can let them know ahead of time, hey, I am okay with this, or I want this, that is a gift to your loved ones. It helps to eliminate indecision. It should help to eliminate guilt, and it should absolutely make sure that someone you love and someone you trust is authorized to speak with doctors and view your records. Because if you don't have this document, who's authorized? Your family might have to go to court to get a court order to get to make decisions for you, which is something we don't want. So let's talk about, let's say you have an advance directive. How can you ensure your wishes are honored, even with that or without that? So Mike, why don't you take us through that?
Sure. So we're going to discuss a number of issues, and the overarching point is that you can be as specific and as directive as you like. We're gentle critics of the sort of form check the box advanced directives, where you really don't have the opportunity to elaborate in a way that you can be really confident that your wishes are going to be respected. At different times, as a bit of an introduction for Myra as well, both of us worked with the ethics committee at the Stanford Hospital and at El Camino Hospital. So our experience is hands-on in terms of the difficulty of decision-making in very challenging circumstances. So again, as we go through a lot of these issues, we have selected some that are interesting, some that are fun. Again, making the point that you can be as specific as you like and as directive as you like, and you should be creative. What really makes sense for you? What's going to give you, this might sound odd, but some joy in dealing with end-of-life decisions. I will reveal, I mean, I've set aside money to have a party when I'm out of here, because, you know, it's a celebration. It's been a great run. So with all of that, okay. First of all, we're going to talk about, let's go to the next slide, about disposition of remains, your choices. And again, making the point that it isn't simple. The two most obvious choices that folks make are, number one, burial or cremation. You know all about those. Okay. Green burial is another alternative approach that can be taken. It's kind of going back to the old days where your body is placed in a cloth sack in the ground. There's no concrete, there's no brass. It's ecologically comfortable in a sense. So that's increasingly popular. Another new emergence, and this is new California law allowing this, composting. Natural organic reduction is the terminology in the legislation. It isn't implemented quite yet, although it has become law. So it is going to be implemented in a couple of years. You can, if you're interested in this kind of thing, to look into it. You can include it in your advance directive. We've had a couple of clients do so already. When you think about green burial and composting, you know, it really is a throwback. I mean, it's, in a way, it's the way things used to be. The funeral industry is not a fan of some of these, although it's responding and finding ways to monetize green burials. But the point is choices, right? Know you have alternatives. Know you have choices. Okay, cremation. Let's talk about ashes. And if this isn't an opportunity to explore creativity, nothing is. Now, these are real client examples. We have countless. Okay, let's go through some that I personally am familiar with. Some of the more obvious are, somebody says, you know, I want to be cremated. I want my ashes distributed at sea, in the mountains, at my favorite hiking trail, on and on. Okay, logical, relatively typical, very comfortable. You know, I like it. Okay, into space. A client of ours at the time we did his documents was an engineer, aerospace engineer. His dream forever was to go into space. He was aging out. He was getting to be too old. They wouldn't let him go up on a ship. Now, you know, we look at some of the folks who got up in these trips where you, like William Shatner, older guy, maybe that changed. But the point is, his advance directive and his trust both say that some of his ashes are to be placed in a capsule. His trust is going to pay for the payload, and it's going to go up into space sooner or later after he passes. He's still living, hasn't changed it. So his ashes are going into space. Bloomingdale's, what the heck? One of our dearest clients, her joy in life was shopping at the Stanford Shopping Center. Her advance directive specifically identifies the corner of the building at the Stanford Shopping Center where her daughter promises she will dump those ashes. Yeah, is it legal? Is it comfortable? Well, we'll think about that later. Duck pond explosives. Okay, another one of our very creative clients, a guy, his joy in life was going to the duck pond where his club had ownership and there were ducks. He wanted his ashes, it's going to happen, loaded into shotgun shells. And his buddies are to shoot them over the duck pond so that he becomes one with the duck pond. With Rover, you probably got that one. A couple of our clients have said, I want my ashes to be intermingled with the ashes of my dog. Son's lungs? Huh? Okay, picture this. Dad says, I want my ashes at sea. Son gets a great idea. Rather than just go to the shore, he hires a small airplane, the pilot. He goes up with the pilot. They're over the sea. He says, it's time to do it. He's kind of forgetting aerodynamics for just a moment. He opens up the window and he opens up the container that has the ashes and he dumps them out. Well, what happens? The ashes fly into the cockpit.
Oh,
He and the
no.
pilot are inhaling Dad. So, you can be creative, but you got to be careful, heads up about these things. So there's got to be some limit to creativity, but talk about being one with Dad and what a memory. They'll never forget that. You may never forget that as well. So again, lots of creativity. Now let's go on to a couple of other provisions that are out of the ordinary. Cryogenic preservation. We've had a couple of clients now say that I want my body, or at least my brain, to be cryogenically preserved, basically put in a deep freezer, so that subsequently when technology is caught up so that I can have a robotic body, I will be implanted. And again, it takes a lot of money to do this. And the individual, no doubt, an engineer at Stanford, he's an engineer at Stanford, he set aside a lot of money, and we actually had to set up the trust in New York, which was more compatible with this kind of a long range plan. He knows this could be 1,000 years in the future. Now, will everything really be preserved by then? He'll never know. He can't criticize us or anybody else, but it was his dream. No anesthesia. Another very sophisticated individual has a fear of anesthesia that is greater than anything else. And his document says, in no uncertain terms, shall any form of anesthesia be used, no matter what. His agent is on board. There's been an explicit discussion. Now, that sounds crazy to most of us, but, that's what this individual needed. A number of folks who have gone through chemo or radiation say, never again, I don't want that to happen. Now, we know this works. So we're not advocating anything here, just showing you that if you have an issue, you don't ignore it. You don't just maybe write it in a little note to yourself. You can incorporate it into the document. What about the wish that many have, leaving your body to science? Now, the reason we put this up here is I've had many folks say, I really want to do that. Putting it in your advance directive is not enough. You have to make plans in advance. My father-in-law, Myra's father, did this, had to fill out a lot of forms at the Stanford Department of Anatomy, I believe it was, in advance. Importantly, the person named the advance directive has to know about this. It can't be a surprise. Family members should know so that they don't go crazy and object and create problems. So something that might seem very easy, like a really nice thing you want to do and you want to say, well, you got to be careful. You have to know how the system works, right? So again, it's an example of something someone wanted and needing to explore it and understand it. Okay, what about brain death, organ donations, an issue that should be settled, but as you'll see in just a moment, it is settled, but it may not be in the future. Brain death is the definition of death in California. That means all brain activity has ceased. Now, your heart and lungs, automatic systems, digestive systems, they may still be functioning. But if your brain has ceased to function, you are dead. And that's when organ donations can happen. Needless to say, critically important for organ donations. While somebody's body is still functioning, there's blood flow, organs are going to be functional and they'll be available. Well, let's go to the next slide. Partly, and again, this is a apolitical statement. It's just relating what is going on. A number of folks who are anti-abortion and who've experienced success lately in the Supreme Court are also of the mind that everybody should be kept alive, that brain death is not appropriate because your body is still functioning. So there's a movement just beginning, not visible yet. We certainly don't publicize it. We'll chat about it here. We don't give it any ink or any press or anything like that. But the goal for a lot of folks is to modify the definition of death. So death only happens when all bodily functions cease. So it's a trend that may or may not happen. Not insignificant, frankly, because think about it. This would be a dramatic change in the world of organ donations, if nothing else. And also for those of us who say, as many do, if recovery to cognizance, to awareness is impossible, let me go. That's what most say. You don't have to say that. Well, this would undercut that to some extent if it happens. So again, it's our job to watch this trend and be aware of it, so that when we draft documents for you, we take these things into consideration. Again, that's our job for you. As I say so often, we are paid to worry for you. And this is one of the many things that we're watching. Now we're going to shift to a discussion of patient advocacy, and Mark is going to do kind of an interview format as we go through a number of slides and points. I want to just say a couple of things about Myra. Myra also, like I did, went to the Stanford Law School. And after she graduated, what does she do with that Stanford Law degree where you can get a job at any big firm? She volunteered in a health clinic. She has been volunteering in the world of health advocacy for years and years and years. As I said earlier, has worked with the ethics committee, has written an enormous amount, has given lectures on this topic, and served as a volunteer chaplain at the hospital. So again, there's a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that she can bring to this topic. So with that introduction, Mark, why don't you, I guess, get us rolling?
Yeah, so thank you for the transition. And yeah, it's my privilege to be interviewing my mom, Myra Gerson-Gilfix, because she's been a patient advocate. Not only has she advised many of our clients, if you're a member of our Peace of Mind, if you're a current client and a member of our Peace of Mind program, she's available to consult with you about this, but she also has been a patient advocate for me when I went through some medical challenges a few years ago, and was incredibly helpful and may have helped to save my life and has helped to save many people's lives, we truly believe, by educating and empowering people on what they need to do when they're going to the hospital. So, Mom, why don't we go through what a patient advocate is? Why don't you just say what is a patient advocate and why are they so important?
Well, I mean, there are professional patient advocates, and sometimes it may be worth the money to hire one. However, my goal is to make sure that each and every one of us can be a patient advocate for someone else, a loved one, or can have a patient advocate available to them. And as the slide says, the person that you name in your advance directive is a good candidate to be your advocate. And, one of the things that I noticed when I've been doing a lot of counsel about doing an advance directive is that most of the time it's when you're unable to speak for yourself, and often near the end of life. And so I wanted to do something about keeping people prematurely from the end of life. So yes, your agent may be the one that you name, but since that person is legally entitled to speak for you when you can't speak for yourself, you may also, and probably will also, want someone to advocate for you when you're just very ill, or you've been injured, or you have to deal with the medical system, especially during hospitalization. And that can be some other person as well. It can be your faith community. It can be another child that you haven't named as your agent. It can be a family member, a friend, anyone who's willing to be there with you and for you. And they don't have to be formally trained. And in fact, a prominent geriatrician said that this is an area where lay people can be really valuable. But I mean, obviously, the more they know, the better. But what can they do? Yeah. They can be there with you at a doctor's appointment to take notes. They can be in the hospital. If they do nothing else but make sure that everyone who enters your room cleans their hands, they could be saving you from one of those awful hospital actions.
Yeah, and just take a step back, because you hit on this. Is the advance directive is a legal document that names the person or the people who can step in to communicate on your behalf if you can't communicate for yourself.
Right.
And obviously, you need someone in the hospital in that case.
Yeah.
But I think the key here is, even if you can communicate, even if you're with it, a patient advocate is someone who is there with you in the hospital or with you in doctor's appointments. Again, you were my advocate, so I can speak very well to this. Who can communicate and help out, even if you're with it. So you don't need to have someone named in Advance Directive for them to be your patient advocate. And as you say, they don't need to be a medical expert, and they can save your life. Going back to those statistics, 99,000 people dying every year from hospital-based infections, 250,000 or more dying from medical errors. They can save your life. So why don't we talk more specifically, Mom, about what they can do? So let's give some examples. If you have to go to the hospital, what would a patient advocate actually do? You hit on some of these.
Well, as number one, make sure everybody washes their hands. Number two, they can ask questions for you. They can take notes for you. One friend whose husband was in the hospital very seriously ill, I just stopped and got a notebook for her so she could keep track of what was happening in the day-to-day lives of the hospital. And she actually managed to stop a duplicate test from happening, because somebody came in and told her, and she said, "What are you doing?" And he told her, and she said, "I think that was done yesterday." They checked. She also didn't know who to communicate with. I mean, this is minor navigating the healthcare system. You just need to know who to talk to. Who's the attending physician? So we helped her find out who was the resident in charge. And once she asked the question, not only did he tell her how to reach him, he said, on weekends, you need to call this person. But you'd be surprised how obscure sometimes it is who is in charge of your care or your loved one's care.
When I used to have I think the key point, hospitalization is disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have the mindset that when you go to the hospital, or if you're in a doctor's appointment, you kind of turn your brain off a little bit. It's like, okay, this is what they do. They have their machine in place. I will let them do what they need to do. I shouldn't question too much. I don't need, it's their job. I'm outsourcing the thinking and the management to them. And that's totally not the case, right?
That's exactly right. But I want people to remember, and you need to have some amount of trust. And I think it's reasonable to assume that everyone there wants to help. And of course, when you do ask questions, use tact, and express gratitude often. But yes, you can't assume that they all know what's happening or that the system is working properly. And the more you give them the opportunity to avoid a mistake, the more grateful they will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have a lot of clients who are doctors and nurses and hospital workers, and we love them, and I respect them so much. This is not a criticism of them. It's more that they have so much on their plate, like all of us. So anything that we can do to help. And I think you made such a crucial point, that two things that I learned so much about, that literally just the act of every time someone comes into a hospital room, asking them kindly to wash their hands or sanitize. And that has two benefits, right? It's one, to make sure that they're reducing the odds of a hospital-based infection. And two, it kind of tells them, hey, we're on top of things. So, yeah, right. And also just the power, I guess in these days, certainly making sure people wear masks when they come in. You don't want another type of hospital-based infection in this day and age of COVID and influenza and all this stuff. And what the issue of getting second opinions and being an advocate to getting second opinions?
Well, everyone is entitled to a second opinion. And if a doctor says you don't need one, then I think you should switch doctors. Not all second opinions are good, as we discovered, unfortunately. So, the more you advocate for someone else, even if you don't have experience, the more you're going to learn. As I learned with you, Mark, I needed to do some research. And one of the best sources, I just want to tell people, is something called Up to Date. If you're going to do research, use good sources. That's one of the best. You do have to have a subscription, but in some cases, it's definitely worth it. There are other sources, but that's a whole nother seminar.
Could you repeat what that was?
It's called
How do you
Up
find
to Date.
How do you find it?
UP, well, go online, but again, it's fairly expensive. My own doctor actually was able to give me a 2-month subscription temporarily for a while, but
So you just Google up to date, medical studies, and you would, if you have a loved one with a medical condition, the best source is go to up to date. If you need to
that's
subscribe and look
one
up
source. There
articles.
are a whole lot of good sources, but that is one of the best.
That's amazing. So just to kind of sum it up, Bob, so patient advocates don't need to be medical experts. And if you can't
Right.
do the research ahead of time, that's okay. But it can be as simple as sitting in on meetings and taking
Yes.
notes. Because if you're the patient, and we've all had loved ones who are in the hospital, maybe those of you listening have been in the hospital, it is overwhelming because not only are you listening to a bunch of experts, you're freaking out a little bit, right? It's very
That's
traumatic
right.
to deal with
Yeah,
these.
I mean,
So
I
just as
consider
simple as taking
myself
notes.
fairly sophisticated, and when I got a scary, not even a diagnosis, my brain turned off, and I called a friend. It really
Yeah.
helps. It really helps.
So it can be as simple as just being there, taking notes, asking questions of nurses and healthcare providers. Hey, did you already do this test, or why is this test being
Right.
done? Have you washed your hands? Hey, can you make sure you have the mask on? Just things as simple as that can literally be the difference of life and death.
Yeah,
Right?
and just knowing that that it's okay to ask questions, that it's okay to ask people to wash their hands. Just knowing that is empowering, and it changed the whole dynamic between you and the staff in a good way, as long as you're.
Absolutely. And again, we love healthcare providers and doctors and nurses and administrators. Like, hospitals are hard, and caring for patients is hard. This is not a criticism of medical providers. They've saved all of our lives, right? And they've been heroes through the COVID pandemic. This is more helping them, really, is how I see it. But yeah, so I just, speaking for myself, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was scared of asking too many questions. I didn't want to come across as, is that aggressive? But no, this is about empowering yourself, and it's helping them to do their jobs better. I think any professional can appreciate little reminders of things when you feel a little bit overwhelmed at times. So, any final thoughts on this before we transition to the next part of this talk?
The only thing I would say to people, and I've had one client who consulted me, she told me that her sister had offered to come in when she was going to have surgery from out of town. She had no one else, and she didn't know if she wanted to, inconvenience her sister. And I said, yes, you can inconvenience your sister. She's willing to help. Accept help. I know all of you would be willing to give help and probably help a loved one or a friend. So if you need it, get it. It's could be life-saving, and it's a gift to the person who's helping you as well.
Great
Amazing
advice. See.
Yeah, and for anybody who's a member of our Peace of Mind program, a client of Gilfix and the Polar Firm, Myra's available if you or a loved one's going to the hospital for a consultation at no charge. So if you already are a client of our firm and a member of the Peace of Mind program, talk to us, take advantage of that. It's amazing. So thank you so much. I think that's literally can be the difference between life and death in many cases, or at least making sure that you get the best possible care and understand all your options, because it is overwhelming when you're facing these issues. So thank you for that. Now let's go on to what we want to avoid or put off as long as we can. That's end of life planning and options around that. So Mike, why don't you take us through that?
Sure. And as I was listening to the discussion of the patient advocate, it actually had me thinking, do people need a legal advocate in, a similar way? And it made me feel really good, because we, as our clients know, we work very hard to translate legalese into English, give people time to make decisions, not rush, because we're not usually in a crisis situation as you are in a healthcare setting. So I really thought it through, and I think we do a good job to making sure that everybody feels comfortable with us, understands what's going on. So with that, let's shift to this topic, which is often, so many folks think that the Advance Directive is a living will. It's only about end-of-life planning. We've made clear it's not. You can include countless directions and discussions in your document that have nothing to do with end of life. However, it is topical. Okay. Some folks say, do everything, keep me going. Fine. We are all about respecting your decision. So we have no right answers, no wrong answers. Whatever a client wants, whatever you want, that's what your document should say, and that's what should be honored. Okay. Most folks say no heroics, no heroics. If there's no hope of recovery, terminate or don't start any form of life-sustaining treatments. The most typical form of life-sustaining treatment, by the way, is it's nothing where there's a plug to pull. You know, the phrase pull the plug, we all use it. It's symbolic, not literal. There usually is no plug to pull. It's usually nutrition and hydration, tube feeding. That's what's going on to sustain folks. So in every advanced directive that we do, as you know, when somebody is of this view, we have a very specific provision saying, in essence, when I say no heroics, don't sustain me, your document will say, I specifically include the cessation, the non-use of any artificial administration of nutrition and hydration, no tube feeding. Okay? So we have to be aware of what the issues are and what doctors, where they may hesitate and address those issues. What about physician-assisted death? Again, we are advocating nothing. It's simply what the law is in California. 2 or 3 states in the country allow this. Very, very, very limited. Oregon was the first state. There was a lot of criticism thinking people would flock to Oregon to end their lives. Didn't happen. Absolutely did not happen. It's not used that much. It's quite rare. The key elements of physician-assisted death are that, number one, you have to be terminally ill, about to die. You have to be completely aware of what's going on, full capacity. So if somebody suffers from dementia, or if they are not really aware of their environment, where they might have said, I want my life to end, can't do it. You have to be fully aware. You have to talk with doctors 2 or 3 different times. They have to certify that you know what you're doing, that they fully explained everything. And here's the most important kicker. You have to self-administer the medication. You cannot have the patient advocate do it. You cannot have the person named in the advance directive do it. That would be a crime. So you have to be really careful. Now, there's movement in some sectors to change the law to allow someone else to administer the medication if you go through all of the other steps in terms of having capacity. So it doesn't limit the use of this option quite so dramatically. And there's other folks, as mentioned earlier, who want to restrict this and not allow it to even happen. So it's a political issue in California. I believe this opportunity will be expanding, not constricting. In the vast majority of states, it's not even an option, but it isn't available. It's one of the things we need to know about. And what I think is important about it is that it is empowering. It is empowering. And that's what I think this is all about, making sure that you know what the options are and that you become educated about the options. Let's move on to a couple of others. Recently, I was educated by a client who said, I am going to exercise VSED.
Why was he doing this?
Well, I was going to say that this was an individual who was diagnosed in the very early stage with early stage dementia. He was in his early 50s, Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. Early onset is not common. It is genetic. It can advance so quickly, and he is very well aware of it. He's showing some symptoms. A very responsible individual with an amazing sense of humor, a supportive spouse. I've had long discussions with them. So this is very voluntarily, you just stop eating and drinking. You do have the right to do that. Nobody can compel you. Now, remember, in your advance directive, if you are of this view, you would also have a provision saying no artificial administration of nutrition and hydration. That would reinforce this. So again, you have to make sure that your advocate, the person named in your document, is on board. If family members could object or intercede. Importantly, California is one of the very few states that allow each of us in our advance directive to identify a family member who is deprived of the right to go to court to intervene and interfere with my decision making. Very few states have this. And if you have somebody in your family you think would not go along with this, who would be upset for religious reasons or ethical reasons or any kind of reasons, you might want to, and you would want to include that person in your advance directive. So if you exercise VSED, you would obviously utilize hospice care. If you do that, life expectancy can be surprisingly long. 2-3 weeks years ago, Myra and I were involved in a very actually famous, in the legal world, very famous case where a court order was finally obtained to allow somebody to have nutrition and hydration withdrawn. And we visited him in the nursing home where he was completely incapacitated. And he lived at least 2.5, 3 weeks, which really surprised me. So it can be a long time.
And that was the Drabeck case, right?
That was the very famous. Yeah,
I studied that. We studied that in law school, by the way. It's pretty cool that you guys were involved in a case that we actually studied in law school.
Yeah, that was our case. Not just involved. We managed the case. We did the briefs for the appellate court. We argued the case. It made law. So we're not, for lawyers, we're exceptionally involved in the healthcare decision making process. Myra is a lot of the reason for that, but it's a real service to our clients. Cryogenic preservation, by the way, is separate from VSED, and we've mentioned it earlier, but it is part of end-of-life planning. Ted Williams was one of the cases where this came up. Very complicated case, but again, it makes the point that there are new technologies, there are new opportunities emerging. Some of them are scientifically based, some of them are not, but you're in charge. That's maybe my last message to you before Mark moves on and concludes this discussion. You are in charge. There's no right answers. There's no wrong answers. If you want to do something that we think is crazy and can't work, we'll tell you. But if you insist, it's going to be in your advance directive. So, be aware of your exposure when you're in the hospital. Heed Myra's words about the need for a patient advocate. Take the advance directive seriously. Your kids, if you have kids who have not done their advance directives, they should do advance directives. You never know. You never know. Mark?
So let's sum this up. So we went through a lot here, and I think the key theme here is empowerment. That's what this is all about in the medical system. And when you have medical challenges or medical issues or in the hospital, I think a lot of us feel like we're losing all of our power, like everything is kind of going to the wind. It's up to other people. It's not the case. Getting an advanced healthcare directive into place, making sure it's up to date, is a crucial legal tool to have in place, but it's more than that. So what do you need to do to ensure that you're safe in the hospital, that your wishes are honored? Well, if you don't have an advance directive, and many of you listening may have it, but what about your loved ones? What about your kids? What are your nephews, your aunts, your uncles, your parents? If you don't have an advance directive in place, you need to put them into place. Otherwise, who's going to have the authority to speak to doctors? Who can view your medical records? You have to have a HIPAA waiver in these documents, or someone might be named. They can't even look at your medical records. So if you don't have one, you need to put one into place. But even if you have one, maybe this discussion stoked some issues or stoked some questions in your mind that you want to address in your updated advance directive. You need to make sure the right people are named. Maybe you named someone 5 years ago and they're sick now and they can't do it, or someone's out of the country now, or you're no longer close to that person, or they're just not the right fit anymore. Revisit it, make sure it's not out of date. We also refer to documents as becoming stale. So anytime you have to present either legal, healthcare, or financial documents to banks or hospitals, we know from experience, hospitals don't like old advance directives. If you have one from 15 years ago, maybe you say, hey, it seems all fine to me. Do you think a hospital administrator is going to look at a document from 2001 and say, oh yeah, sure, we're going to follow that? No, their legal team is going to say, hey, be very careful. How do we know this hasn't been updated 3 times? So there's value in just honestly refreshing and republishing these documents, re-signing them every few years, even if you're not making changes. Share these documents. If you've named somebody, give them a copy of it. Give copies to your healthcare providers. Put it in your records. Make sure that wherever you're getting your healthcare, they have a copy of your advance directive so it's easy for them to find if they need it. And talk to your family about this. This is an area where we know some issues are sensitive. I know sharing financial information is especially sensitive, but this is an area where we really encourage people to talk and communicate. Let your family know what you would want. Let them know who's going to step in. And we talked about patient advocacy and having that patient advocate. Talk to your friends and loved ones and your family. Who can be that advocate? If you have to go to the hospital or there's an emergency, you want that person ready to go so they can come in with you. And as Myra is so amazingly saying, they don't have to be an expert. They don't have to be a medical expert. They don't have to be a doctor. They just are there to take notes, to keep track of your tests, to ask people to wash their hands and wear a mask. That can save your life. We talk about medical errors killing 250,000 people a year, hospital-based infections, 100,000 a year. Little steps can prevent those. So have that patient advocate there. And we always want to say, the 3Ds, overcome the danger of delay and denials. This goes to some other issues, but don't put these issues off. Talk to your family. Make sure that you are planning ahead. This should be part of a comprehensive estate plan, or revocable living trust, durable power of attorney, advance directive. These documents all work together to make sure that if you are incapacitated, if you're out of it, or after you're gone, your wishes are followed. The advance directive does go to what happens with your remains after you're gone. So your trust, your will, that doesn't cover that. You need to have this really there. It's so crucial. So talk to us. We can help you. Stay tuned for more webinars. Like this video if you thought it was helpful, share it. This is for those watching on YouTube, but for those of you watching live, this is going to be on our YouTube channel. Share it. Subscribe to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel. We're going to be putting out a lot of free educational content. We used to charge a lot to train other lawyers in these areas. We want to just educate and empower you. So we can help you. Don't miss the opportunity to get these documents into place. Peace of mind members, you're already members of our community. If there's anybody who's watching who's not, and of course, you can easily contact us and we can help you with these issues. If you are a member of our client community, contact us. You know where to find us, gilfix.com. You can call us at 650-493-8070. Contact us. We can help you go through these issues. We can review these. We can make sure your documents are up to date. And if you don't have them, you get them into place. So I want to thank everybody for being here. We are going to get to just a couple of questions. We have a couple here. And so again, I hope you got a lot out of this. Be empowered. Ask questions when you're with doctors. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get second opinions. Don't be afraid to ask people to wash their hands when they come into the room. Don't be afraid to ask people to wear their masks when they come into the room. Don't be afraid to ask, do I really need this second test? It seems like I got it yesterday. It's all about empowering yourself and your loved ones. That's what this is really all about. It can save your life. So on that note, why don't I'm going to stop sharing slides for a moment, and why don't we take just a couple of questions. So we have one. So a good question from Rosemary. Can you have a backup patient advocate in case one that you've sort of named or the person is out of the state or out of the country? Mike, why don't you take that? And maybe Myra, you can also answer.
Well, the first thing is when you sign an advance directive, you name somebody who is your principal agent for healthcare decision making. It's always wise to have an alternate. The first person you name may not be available, as this question astutely points out. So you have a backup in the directive. In terms of the patient advocate, Myra, what would you say about that? Because again, that may not be the person always named in the advance directive.
Yeah, no, having a person help you be your advocate is not necessarily a formal appointment at all. It's somebody, it could even be someone from your faith community. It could be a friend. And, it's something to talk about with your friends. It's not, if you want to give them power to see your medical records, you can also sign a HIPAA form that gives legal authority to view your records. But even without that, they should be able to accompany you to a doctor's appointment, or be present when you're dealing with the medical system in some form. Sometimes that might be through phone, but it's not necessary to have a formal backup for an advocate.
And another question, and what if someone wants to get in touch with you, Myra, about healthcare decision making or about being a patient advocate or issues if they're going to the hospital? To be clear, if this is only for people who are members of our client so existing clients or members of our Peace of Mind program, how would they get in touch with you to set that up?
They should call through the office and they'll set it up. And it's a free hour of just tips and, finding out what's going on with you and what you need.
So if you're a member of our client community, member of the Peace of Mind program, you can talk to Myra about this. But I think we're going to wrap it up now. Any final thoughts? I'll start with you, Mike, and then I'll go to you, Myra, or Dad, I should say. Final thoughts?
Final thought is, again, we so enjoy this opportunity. I think this webinar makes the point that you might have done your advance directive, but your lives move along, the law moves along, healthcare developments move along, and you got to stay on top of things. And you just can't get too much information to reinforce what you've done and ideas about what you can and should do. So, we view this as a privilege to be able to share our thoughts with you and to embrace you as part of our client community so that you're taken care of.
And Well,
Yeah, I would just say, keep communicating, whether it's about your advance directive and your end of life wishes, or what you want, and your ability to ask questions during your medical care. I mean, just feel like you're a partner in your care, and that communication is essential.
amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. I learned from this talk, having a patient advocate is so critical. This is all about being empowered and empowering those who you love and who you trust to help you in a time of need and taking the burden off of their shoulders. That's what this is all about. So make sure you have your estate plan in place, trust, power of attorney, advance directive, a lot of other issues. Like this video if you're watching on YouTube, share it if you think anybody could benefit from it. Subscribe to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel. Follow us if we can help you directly. That's what really this is all about. We want to empower you and your loved ones to stay safe, healthy, and sane, as my mom likes to say. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you all.